Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where Roger and I have returned for my weekend reading report. It's time for my weekend reading report, where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the past week. And this week, that wasn't much. You know, I complain every week about how little time I have to read, but last week was like extra bad because I had to work extra hours, and then somehow my 2 day weekend has become a 1 day weekend. So, I was just reading here and there for a few minutes at a time wherever I could grab the chance. It's been one of those weeks, but remarkably, I did finish reading The Talisman, which I feel like I've been reading forever. Now I literally just finished this morning. So I just finished this. So, and wow, the ending of this book. So I feel like I've been reading this forever. What's it been, like 3 weeks or something? Because yeah, I feel like I've been reading this forever. I feel like I've been on a cross-country journey to reach the talisman myself. This, of course, is a book all about going to a place to get a thing. It's about the quest for a magical thing. Our hero, Jack Sawyer, is on a quest to get a magical thing to save his mother's life, which involve alternate dimensions and all kinds of other cool stuff. It has some great characters in this book. Has a couple terrible characters in this book. I mostly really enjoyed this book. But the ending to this book, okay. This book is by Stephen King and Peter Straub. I was hoping that Peter Straub would help Stephen King avoid the Stephen King ending. You know, famously, it is said that Stephen King cannot end a book, and sometimes that's the case. He's had a couple good endings in some of the books I've read, but sometimes he doesn't know how to end a book. And this ending is the worst ending to any of the Stephen King books I've read. This ending is just... So, I knew how this was going to end. I mean, you as a reader going in know that eventually Jack Sawyer will get to the place and he will find the thing. In this case, the magical talisman, which will save his mother's life. I mean, that is never in doubt. You know that's going to happen. And so I was getting towards the end of this book, but I still had like 120 or 30 pages or something left. And he's reached the town where the talisman is, and he's obviously about to find the talisman, but there's still all these pages left in the book. I'm like, well, what other things is this book going to throw at me before we get to the conclusion? No, the conclusion is well over 100 pages long. It goes on forever and ever and ever. It's just so stretched out. The last portion of this book could have been 50 pages, but it's well over 100 pages. Well over. It probably could have been less than 50 pages, to be honest, for what actually happens. It is just so stretched out. I mean, the book is probably too long, but I didn't really feel that until the end. When you get to the end, it's just like, okay, this is ridiculous. And it literally is. What happens is ridiculous in this ending. I mean, I feel like when they started to get to the end, Peter Straub and Stephen King got together, and then they both got really stoned, and then just cranked out this ending and went on and on with it, and they were both stoned out of their minds. And that's why this ending is so stupid. Because there's so much stupidity in this ending. First of all, okay, these are mild spoilers. Pretty mild. Jack gets to the place where the magical thing is, and he has to get into the creepy house where the talisman is, and the talisman is guarded by guardians, and it's just there are these guardians guarding the talisman to keep Jack from the talisman. And it's like this ending, that portion of it where he actually goes in to get the talisman is straight out of a video game. You know, where he has to go up against the Guardians that are guarding the talisman, and he has to use the magical item that he got in the book, and he uses the magic item against the Guardians, and of course they just, you know, it's just, he gets through them, and then there's a bigger Guardian, you know, because he's reached the next level and he has to use his magic thingy again. Will it have enough strength? Of course it does. I mean, come on. But that's not the end of it. When him just getting the talisman isn't the end. It should be the end, but it's not. It has to go on and on and on afterwards because we have some other villains that we have to take care of. So let's take as much time as possible to get rid of these villains. And it's just, wow. The ending of this blows. So, for the most part, I mean, they get past all that, then you have the very end of the book, which is kind of nice. The few pages at the very end are okay, but before that, the actual finding of the talisman, dealing with the villains, it's just so stupid, and the writing is dumb, and it's just like, it was literally written by stoned people. You can tell. But overall, I enjoyed the book. Like, right up until that ending, right up until the ending, I was enjoying the book. Although, even though this is Peter Straub writing along with Stephen King, there are a lot of really Stephen King things in this book, some of which could be considered offensive now. There are a lot of stereotypes in this book. Most egregiously, Stephen King's favorite trope, his favorite trope of all time, the magical Negro. The magical Negro makes an appearance in the form of Speedy Parker. Speedy, who is here to help our protagonist. He sets him on his way, gives him magical things, shows up right when he's needed. So Speedy, who talks like he just walked out of a minstrel show because Stephen King wrote this character. So I've noticed in reading these older Stephen King books, I don't know if this continues on into the newer Stephen King books because I'm reading them in publication order. But in the older Stephen King books, at least, there's racism in the older Stephen King books. And I don't believe for a second that Stephen King is hateful or bitter against people who are not white. I don't think it's coming from that place. He doesn't think that people who are not white are inferior to white people. But you do get the sense that he thinks that they are different. Somehow they're different, and that difference goes beyond just cultural differences or differences that might come from experience. I get the distinct feeling from, and I don't know anything about Stephen King's upbringing or his life really, but I get the feeling from reading his books that Stephen King grew up surrounded by white people and only white people, and he only had any experience with non-white people through television or something. Like, he never actually met anybody who was not white. This seems unbelievable, but it seems like it from his books. Because, you know, you'll usually have one or two non-white characters in a book, and they're not inferior, but they might be wizards. You know, they're definitely different. You know, you get which is not good, because then you're making non-white people the other. They're different somehow. I get that feeling from reading Stephen King. And it's very apparent in this book with, you know, this unfortunate trope, which Stephen King seems to love, and here it is again. There are other stereotypes in this book, but that is probably the most egregious. these are just things that you'll find in Stephen King books, and this one Peter Straub book at least. The plot of this novel, like I've said before, is barely there. It's just we have to go to a place to get a thing. But along the way, there are a lot of very strong episodic adventures that are very entertaining and well done. So overall, the book, I think, is a good one. It has a lot of heart, I think, this book. I like the character of Jack Sawyer because he does, he goes through a lot. I mean, they torture him, literally, Stephen King and Peter Straub, through the course of this book. But he's a 12-year-old kid. At the beginning of the book, he is very much a 12-year-old kid. But by the middle of the book, he's had to, put his childhood behind him. And he really toughens up as a character. And so I like the main character of this book. I think he's done quite well. And there's one other character, Wolf, who is a fantastic character. I love that character. Other characters in this book, not so good. Kind of hit and miss with the other characters of the book. But overall, I enjoyed it. But this ending, man, oh my goodness. It has to be read to be believed, really. So I read this, and I finally finished this. Unfortunately, I double-checked, and for the 500 book challenge, this is the challenge where I'm reading 500 books I own before I will buy any new ones. It's actually book 79. I was convinced in my head it was book 80, but when I actually went and checked, and it's book 79. So the 500 book challenge drags on. But, this was a good book. So what am I reading next? Well, I'm going to be reading a couple books from my TBR, my 12-book TBR. I got a couple books from there I'm going to knock out. I'm going to go and read The Black Master, The Shadow, which is The Shadow #2, The Black Master. This is the second book in the paperback line of Shadow novels, which are reprints from the old magazine stories, pulp magazines. So The Shadow, The Black Master by Maxwell Grant, who is really Walter B. Gibson. So I'm going to be reading this. And then I'm going to be reading this. This is Between Time and Terror, which is an anthology of science fiction horror stories. Because I'm like, you know what? I think I want to read some short stuff. I want to read some shorter pieces after that giant novel. So, and this does not have Stephen King in it, remarkably. But it does have a bunch of other really great writers in it. I mean, it has a fantastic lineup. So that'll be fun, Between Time and Terror. And then, after those two books, I'm going to be reading this book, which I'm really, really looking forward to. This is The City of Marble and Blood by Howard Andrew Jones. This is a book that Howard Andrew Jones sent to me. It is the second book in the Hanuvar Chronicles. I read the first book. The first book was fantastic. Lord of a Shattered Land. It was really good. So, yeah, looking forward to this. Sword and Sorcery. And I know it's going to be awesome. So, The City of Marble and Blood. We'll be reading that. I have also been reading Thor, but I am behind. I'm behind in my Thor reading. I have to read every issue of Thor in Thor's original run. And I'm a little bit behind because I have a year to do it. I have actually until October 5th. And I'm a little bit behind. I'm on the third Epic collection. But because of the week I've had, I'm going to have to spend some extra time today reading some issues of Thor. Now, it's fantastic. By this point, Thor is just awesome. It's just awesome. Just read about Ego, the living planet. Ego, the living planet, which is awesome. Look at that crazy conclusion from a previous issue where Ego first appears. That's Ego's first appearance. So, yeah, Thor's awesome. That's rolling right along. I did get a couple things in the mail. Not too much. I didn't order anything that came. But I got a couple books in the mail. And they're both from, I want to get the publisher right. They're both from Bloodbound Books. Bloodbound Books. Is that right? I think that's right. And I got a couple books from them. One is Bleak Warrior by Alistair Rennie. Bleak Warrior, which I suppose is this fellow, this creepy fellow on the cover who has raided Varney the Vampire's wardrobe and is out for trouble. Bleak Warrior, Sword and Debauchery. It's Sword and Debauchery. Metaphysics, ultraviolence, senseless mayhem, and transgressive sex in a darkly fantastic world. So yeah, that's Bleak Warrior by Alistair Rennie. I'm going to read that eventually. Thank you for sending that to me. And they sent me another book as well. This is The Claw of Craving. The Claw of Craving by Joseph Sale. Now this is actually inspired by Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow. So, and actually, the main character of this book, it seems, is named Chambers. For Alan Chambers, a jobless loner, it's the answer to his problems, or so he thinks. Rejected by family and friends and soon to be homeless, Alan makes his last desperate bid to discover the truth of this miserable reality by journeying to an occult brothel. Wow, an occult brothel. Where it's said the worthy might obtain passage to this fabled land of Carcosa. So that sounds interesting. The Claw of Craving. So I got these two books in the mail. Thank you very much for sending this to me, Bloodbound Books. That's pretty cool. But that's it. That's all that arrived. So mostly it's just been working, reading a little tiny bit of Thor, and finishing the Talisman. Next week, or this upcoming week, should be much better. I actually have a couple days off. So that should be cool. And I should have a couple videos coming up this week. At least a couple this week. Maybe 3, maybe 2. Who knows? I'll see you when I see you. Okay, guys. I will catch you next time.